So right now, everybody wants to know sort of the same thing, and that's when exactly can we get back to a semblance of a normal life, right? I mean, people are tired of being quarantined. We're tired of social distancing to the point where we can't even visit our families, where we're tired of going to the grocery store looking like this, right? Nor do I want to see other people walking around looking like this. So at some point, we're going to have to start weaning away from these super uber protective measures and still be careful, but get back to a little bit more of a normal life of humans out in the community. There's sort of two camps on the subject, right? There is the people who feel that maybe COVID-19 is not as bad as it seems, or maybe their specific area hasn't gotten hit as much and they're not seeing it, so they feel they're being unfairly quarantined at home, unable to go to the restaurants they want to go to the gatherings they want to go to, get their haircuts and nails done, and go to the shopping mall and be normal. And they feel that their constitutional rights are being infringed upon because it should be up to the individual to decide if they want to put themselves at risk. Then there's sort of the other side that's saying that we have to continue to bunker down right now. It's too soon, that the businesses should not reopen normal functioning. The beaches should not reopen, all these sorts of things until we're confident that there is a huge downtrend, there's a vaccine available, and things are much different than they are now. Now, the reality is it's obviously something in between. This is not a black or white issue. This is a big gray zone. There's some places that are getting way harder hit and other places that are getting very minimally hit, and we're all sort of, being bunkered down the same way. So I can see how there are some people who feel that they're being unfairly quarantined and their rights are being taken away from them. But we have to remember, this is not about me. This is about we, right? To quote Governor Cuomo. And that means it's not just about our individual selves going out into the community, risking our own selves of getting the virus. It's the fact that you as an asymptomatic individual could infect other people. Right? So that's what's so weird and scary about this virus, that there's a lot of asymptomatic people going around with the virus that don't know they even have it, right? Because their immune system fought it well enough and they never got any symptoms, but the virus is still there and they could still transmit it, right? So they could transmit it to another individual who may be more susceptible, and potentially that person could get very sick or die. Okay, so that's what this is about. It's not about the individual rights being taken away. It's we're caught in a challenging situation that we have to try and take care of our entire population, society, the best that we can. Both sides have to sort of listen to each other and talk to each other and realize that we are on the same page here, okay? And we're trying to do what's best for society as a whole. Now, just because you may be in an area that hasn't gotten very hard hit doesn't mean you're not going to get hit yet. Now, I want to point out Singapore. Singapore is an example of a country that got a really good control on their viral spread early on. And they did that with aggressive testing, contact tracing, and quarantining, right? So they had it down. But after them being the model country in Asia, what happened? They had a surge of cases. In fact, they became the highest number of cases in an Southeast Asian country. And why did that happen? Because the migrant workers and the working class people who live in these really crowded dormitories, there was no social distancing practice there. And what happened? Although the cases were flat, if you look at this curve, they really flattened out, and then boom, there was an exponential surge, right? And that's just because there was lack of social distancing and it was really crowded conditions, and all it took was one spark. This is a perfect example of how just a little bit can go a long way when it comes to this virus. So we have to be prepared. This kind of a second surge is a real possibility, and I think Singapore's story proves that. So when exactly do we open? Now, again, we can't keep this country closed forever. We need to start getting businesses moving. There have been so many layoffs that people have economic hardship. There's businesses that have shut down. So there is no doubt this has taken a toll. So we got to get life back to normal. But we got to do it carefully, and we have to do it in a calculated way, right? That's the safest way to do this, because what we don't want is a second surge of this virus. Now, there's tons of arguments on how we're going to do this. And to me, first of all, I do believe that this should be regional. Certain areas can start progressing and reopening at different paces than the other areas, because it's clear that the virus does not affect every region and every state the same way. So we have to take that into account. What we need to see is a steady decline in the number of new cases, right? So over the course of a week or two, we have to make sure that there is a downward trend in a specific region, right? We can't get too complacent just after 3 or 4 days because, perfect example is Massachusetts. Here in Western Massachusetts, we're seeing a steady decline now in the number of new cases, whereas Boston is peaking right now. And these are places that are an hour and a half apart. So the influences of what's around you is just as important as what's going on in your locality. So we have to make sure there's a steady decline over the course of a week or two before we get too aggressive in reopening. Now, the other thing we have to make sure is we have the ability to test people, all right? That was a big problem early on. Some of the countries that got a hold on things earlier was because of rapid and aggressive testing. So there's no question we have to be able to test anybody who has symptoms and anybody who's been exposed to somebody who has it. The other thing we need to do is to be able to contact trace. And that means try to backtrace where that virus could be affecting other people, okay? So if someone has the virus, we got to say, all right, they were in a church last week. Let's find out who was close to them in the church and let's talk to them and let's quarantine the people that were potentially exposed. So do an individual guided strategy here. We have to make sure our hospitals, our doctors are prepared for a potential second surge, okay? We need to have enough PPE. We need to be able to protect ourselves, all right? We have to make sure that the hospitals are equipped capacity-wise, equipment-wise, whether it's medications or ventilators or whatever it may be, so that there is no potential for getting overwhelmed. So that is crucial. The other thing we need to make sure we have available is antibody testing, right? So that's going to be really important. Problem with antibody testing is it's the Wild West right now because there's so many vendors and there's so many tests out there, we don't know what's really accurate and what's good. So once the FDA figures out which ones they approve, those are the ones we need to roll out, and we have to be able to check a large number of people. Okay. Now, who should get antibody tested? Ideally, every single person, right? Is that going to be possible? Probably not. So in order to utilize that to reopen the economy, we should start testing high-risk people, such as people who live in nursing homes, people who are 60 and older, people with underlying medical conditions. Honestly, they all should get antibody testing to make sure that it's safe for them to get out into the community because they're the ones that are more likely to get super sick. Now, other things such as workplaces that are going to be high risk, grocery stores, restaurants, places where there's going to be large gatherings of people. So we have to be prepared with a strategy for these areas that have high risk for transmission and know who's been exposed, who's immune, and who's still susceptible. And finally, we have to hope that there's a vaccine in the future because that's sort of going to be the late stage. Of course, the vaccine is not coming anytime soon. We can't wait around for the vaccine before we start reopening, but we need to have a game plan, right? We have to be invested in a vaccine being available at some point and distributing it when it is ready. Businesses like restaurants, for example, should be operating not at full capacity. We have to make sure that there's not overly crowded conditions. I don't think we should restart sporting events at all without fans. I think it's doable, but a stadium right now is out of the question. Schools have to reopen, okay? Schools is a big one, okay? We can't have Zoom-based education, for too long. This is not real school, and, college is only 4 years. So school is important. So the way to handle schools, every single person has to get antibody tested and COVID tested before they can attend school. We need to maintain social distancing. We have to make the classes not as crowded. All those things have to happen, right? Now, the question is going to be if someone is not immune, they have an antibody test that's negative, what do we do different, right? I mean, it's easy to say get the test, but are we going to keep them quarantined? Are we going to say only antibody positive people are going to be able to go to school? This is tricky. So we have to figure out exactly what we want to do with this information. So again, we have to, yes, open the economy. We have to do it carefully and slowly in a controlled fashion. We have to utilize antibody testing to help guide us, especially the higher risk people, and know who should be extra cautious and who should or should not come back into the community. No, we cannot just open up the economy and the businesses just like that, particularly when we're not seeing a downward trend of the virus, right? If the curve is not, it can't just be flattened in your locality, it has to be beyond flat. It has to be reducing, all right? That's the key here. And we have to make sure the hospitals are ready. So if you don't have that formula, we are going to risk ourselves another surge, and that's going to be bad, especially if it happens in the winter during influenza season, and we don't want that. So let's do it carefully, let's do it scientifically, and remember, it's about we, it's not just about me.